Fucking nice.
Ever got heated again.
Oh, lordy. Another long day. Another long day. But I'm good on fucking sleep now, so I don't feel like my mind is stretched. We are going to... We're going to do a couple Last Heroes, warm up a little bit, and then slide a Tarky. I think I was doing Woods last night. We killed the fucking goons. They put me in a very... Well, they fucking murdered me with my M1A for test drive. So hopefully I get that back tonight. We'll see. That was the only map I was going to take it on, dude. I was going to save it until I had it unlocked, and then I was going to start grinding out test drive. But I didn't know I was going to run into the fucking goons, dude, out in the middle of a fucking field. So, yeah, that kind of sucked. So hopefully I get back tomorrow, because it wasn't sure. But, no, we'll warm up, and we'll slide back to Tarky. And go to Woods. And then I don't know where after that. Maybe Interchange. I might end up starting my Shoreline and Reserve task. I don't really know yet. We'll probably watch this VOD, to be honest. If there's any fucking negativity, as like yesterday, these motherfuckers will not be in here with me, dude. Absolutely not. If they decide to come in anyways, I don't think it really matters. But I am going to get my Whittle Spitter, and we is going to load in. We're just going to do Last Hero, warm up a little bit, get the blood flowing. We're going to keep Chop Shop off, though. I play that fucking map too much. Oh, we got to get the strap, too. I don't like leaving these bastards in my room when I'm inside this room. Because then it means if somebody tried burglarizing and raping me, they would have access to one of my guns. Which means they could rape me and then murder me, dude. And I don't want that happening. Oh, man. My neck was fucking destroyed when I woke up this morning, dude. It still hurts like a motherfucker. I didn't know it was going to hurt my neck that badly yesterday. Sore, dude. Oh, lordy. Actually, put that bastard right here. I guess my computer screen was sitting a little low.
Despite this historic clash resonating throughout the centuries, had Napoleon actually won against the British, his terms would have been pretty lenient. He was always more focused on turning around and bullying the next major threat. What I love about Napoleonic alternate history is that this is one of the few moments in human history where global politics entirely depend on...
I tend to watch videos on my phone at like 2x to 3.5x, dude. I was doing that on stream once. I had the video on like 2.5. And someone asked me like, Walty, what the fuck you watch? And I realized that some people don't watch videos that quickly, so. But I go fucking insane when it's on 1x though. It's just, I feel like time is slowing down.
On the mood of a few people. Like international conflict was determined on a whim. So hey, let's break down the irrational contradictions of the little corporal, shall we? While it's undeniable that Napoleon was one of the greatest military minds who ever lived, everything else was erratic at best. First off, despite being the flag bearer of the French Revolution and truly the man who spread nationalism all over Europe, He was ironically a staunch monarchist. Nepotism ran deep in Napoleon's veins. He gave every living relative a valuable kingdom. Napoleon appointed his 3 brothers as kings of Spain, Westphalia, and Holland, while his sisters became the duchesses of Gustalia, Naples, and Tuscany. More than anything, Napoleon's biggest dream was to build up a Napoleonic dynasty which dominated Europe, and he preserved rival dynasties like the Habsburgs in order to obtain its legitimacy. Despite often being depicted as the liberator of the Poles and Italians, he couldn't care less. Second misconception is the idea that the Napoleonic Code, which for the most part was a major step forward towards equal rights, spread like wildfire. Yeah, no. Turns out that fire really only spread to places where it didn't stir up too much trouble. When it came down to it, Napoleon preferred to keep the status quo in the occupied territories intact, for as long as the aristocracy paid their fair share in both goods and conscripts. Last but not least, this guy was extremely dramatic. So it's an alternate 1807. Britain has been humiliated at home and abroad. Instead of securing the Dutch South African colony, it's now just lost most of the Caribbean. Prussia was not annihilated yet, and outside of Russia, no one could rival France. 1807 in our timeline was arguably the peak of Napoleon's ascendancy, and especially popularity. Here we're talking about the birth of the world's first superpower. Unless you count Persia or Rome. France was so ahead here that even if you were to combine everyone in the globe against Napoleon, he would probably still come out ahead. That is, of course, if he played it cool. But this was Napoleon we're talking about. One might assume that a neutral Britain would mean that everyone would kind of just chill for a bit. But there were 2 major events that occurred right after Trafalgar that were pretty much inevitable: Austerlitz and the British invasion. First was the fate of Prussia. The Prussians were slow to respond to the War of the Third Coalition, but when the dust settled, they saw that there was no way they could exist in the world Napoleon was building. The HRE was a thing of the past, and the puppet state of Westphalia soon grew to dominate Germany. Napoleon didn't see Prussia as his equal, because to him, Prussia was like a kid who talks tough, but loses every fight. He promised them Hanover, then took it away. Goaded the king into the War of the Fourth Coalition. Not only that, but after a quick mobilization, the Prussians decided to go on the offensive with some Russian support. After another masterpiece in Jena, the French army could now scratch Berlin off its bucket list. The timings and locations of the battles here would be different here, but the outcome is exactly the same. Prussia can't afford to remain at peace, and nothing it could do would turn the tide. Maybe they attack while Napoleon...
I don't know if I even give a shit about this, to be honest, dude.
Harry Turtledove, king of alternate history, ruler of the what if, titan of timelines. He made that book about the South getting a bunch of AKs during the Civil War. It's a time-honored tradition on this channel to talk about Turtledove. Talk is probably the most diplomatic way of putting it. Every year Tigerstar and I just make fun of him a lot. Poor guy, all he wants to do is make some books and he gets clowned on the internet. He made a series about the Axis winning World War II, he made a series about aliens attacking during World War II, and he made whatever the hell this is. But what if I told you that Turtledove made a fantasy series? Yes, a fantasy series, joining the ranks of Lewis, Tolkien, Sanderson, and that one guy. Turtledove made a high fantasy series. A whole different world. A fantasy world, not alternate history, with dragons and magic and shit. It's World War II, isn't it? It's gonna be based on World War II.
Alright, jag off.
The Darkness series is a 6-book epic set on the continent of Dare-Levay. Dare-Levay? I don't know, there's no official pronunciation. Dare-Levay. I'm gonna call it Dare-Levay. So Dare-Levay's been consumed by war between its various little kingdoms. Each kingdom's role in this war is loosely based on some actual country during World War II. Yep, say what you will, but I think this idea is pretty interesting. Is it wrong that the series is based on World War II? No. But is it also incredibly funny? Yes. So I'm gonna talk about it. So many lore videos exist about A Song of Ice and Fire, or Lord of the Rings. But where are the videos about the Darkness series? It's this one. I'm the best you got. Here's a question. How does a fantasy world act? Like, what's the society like? I know this sounds like a dumb thing to ask, but stick with me. Your typical fantasy setting is medieval. Medieval in aesthetic, and especially in society. Kings, queens, knights, that sort of stuff. Some series really go hard on the whole feudalism thing, like A Song of Ice and Fire. That's just feudal politics. The World of Darkness is not like any fantasy world I've ever seen. Not because it doesn't have fantasy elements. No, there are plenty of those in the books. There's dragons and magic. You even have warring kingdoms. But here's the thing. These medieval kingdoms don't really act like medieval kingdoms. These peasants don't act like peasants. There isn't much of a feudal structure here at all. Instead of peasant armies fighting for some lord or against an invasion of orcs, the battles in Darkness are fought by citizen soldiers. Soldiers who aren't fighting simply for a king, but for their country. This might not seem so strange to our modern eyes, but trust me, when you're so used to medieval politics and medieval fantasy, this catches you off guard. If A Song of Ice and Fire is largely inspired by medieval Britain, then the Darkness series is like Europe in the 19th century. Everyone here is basically acting like the German Empire did after defeating France. They're a kingdom, fighting for a king, but also a people. One funny thing is the soldiers don't even fight with swords or bows. Oh no, everyone fights with sticks, like mage's sticks. They shoot projectiles at the enemy, and they have to reload their magic. Their guns, their magical guns, they shoot beams like bullets. Everything magical here has some equivalent to our world. Like, dragons are aircraft, eggs are bombs. I guess the dragons lay napalm? But then we get to wackier things. Leviathans are submarines. They have these rhino things as tanks. So I know I say this a lot, but I'm a bit of a Turtle Dove critic. The real character of Turtle Dove novels is the scenario itself. That's where Turtle Dove strives. Problem is, you gotta deal with all his actual characters. Oftentimes storylines just blend together as everyone acts the exact same. At least with those alternate history stories, you knew what a Germany or Soviet Union was. Now, imagine a Turtle Dove book where every language, culture, and nation was entirely made up. Imagine it. Using the internet without a VPN is like leaving your phone unattended in a crowded space. One quick moment, and it's gone. That's why I want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of today's video. So typically, I would just go through the series book by book, explaining the story, summarizing how it went. But you know what? There's no point in doing that here, because you could probably guess from just the concept how this is going to end. Maybe you want to find that out by yourself. Maybe you don't even know how the real World War II ended. Well, in that case, this series is for you. Before reading, though, think of this video as your helpful guide to figuring out who the hell anyone is, since the reading experience for the first book is kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. But even though I think we all know how this is going to end, spoiler warning anyway, spoilers for World War II. One major rule in writing when it comes to exposition is to not overload the audience with information. Concepts, places, or people should be introduced and taught naturally in dialogue. It's difficult to do, which is why so many writers are bad at doing it. Exposition is even more crucial in fantasy since this is a fake world that has an entirely different history and rules. This is why most fantasy stories begin small. Get a reader accustomed to a protagonist or anchor character to latch onto, and then the world develops naturally around that. The Darkness series does not do that. You are dumped with lore and exposition right off the bat. Kingdoms like Forthweg, Gusamo, Lagoas, Sibiu, Algarve, and my personal favorite, Giangos. Each of these kingdoms, like I said before, is based off an actual nation's role in World War II. But here's the kicker. These kingdoms don't have the culture of the nation they're based off of. The Germany of this world, Algarve, isn't just a carbon copy of Germany. Oh no, they have the culture of the Italians. Italy winning a war. Now that's true fantasy. The Soviets of this world are Unkerland, which, if you couldn't tell by that name, it's extremely German. Most of the cultural swaps in the series are pretty ironic. They're the biggest nation by far, except you see, Turtle Dove flipped the war. Like the Americans and Brits invade where the Soviets did, and the Soviets invade where the Americans did. You get the point. Poor Forthweg. Stuck smack dab in the middle. They also have another group that lives in these lands. Okay, so moving on, Valmiria is France. Really everything you need to know just from that. They lost some land to Algarve during some past war, and they got it back in a more recent one. The whole Alsace-Lorraine equivalent here is the Marquisate of Rivaroli. Rivaroli. Are they fighting over Chef Boyardee? Really, the most unique country I would say here is Kusamo. They play the role of America, but they're natives to their own island. There was no fantasy Pearl Harbor here, so Turtle Dove had restraint. That's a positive, I guess. Since this is America, this is the one country in the world that doesn't have a kingdom, because, you know, it's America. Instead, it's ruled by 7 princes, also known as an oligarchy. Okay, so this world has one main continent called Der Leve. There's also some other smaller islands, but they're not as important. Antarctica's here too, and it has Antarctica people. Glad we got that squared away. A generation ago, the continent fought one large
Oh, fuck. I don't know what the hell's going on, dude. We're just gonna go straight into Tarkov because I can't even play Arena right now. I don't know what the fuck's going on. We'll see about loading into one of these raids.
interconnected global conflict. This was the 6-Year War, a war where everyone fought against Algarve, so it's Germany. The Algarvians in this world were even responsible for the fall of an ancient empire, the Connians. We'll talk about them later. In more recent times, the Algarve just went full Fire Nation, and the rest of the kingdoms teamed up to beat them down, thus concluding the 6-Year War. The kingdoms of Jelgava, Sibiu, Lagoas, Valmira, and who could forget Unkerland, were victorious. They high-fived while Algarve was punished with the Treaty of Tortuche. Then Unkerland collapsed in a civil war. This was the Twinklings War, which is just the worst name for a conflict. Imagine dying in the Twinklings War. Imagine being a veteran of the Twinklings War. Would you even want to admit it? It'd be like saying you survived the Great Battle of Hello Kitty Island Adventure. So, the Twinklings War was really just a war between brothers, Svemel and Kiat for the throne. I hope I pronounced that right. Poor Unkerland was split in two, and basically destroyed itself over the sibling squabble. Despite having a good advantage at the start, Svemel lost and Kiat won, leading to Kiat purging all the Svemel supporters. So, a country after a great war fought a brutal civil war, and then the losers were purged. I see. Unkerland really is the Russia of this world. They even fought a border skirmish with Giang.
We pulled out as much as we could. We can't take the class 4 plates. Well, no, it would have made me overweight. But we did take all the class 5s though. Well, we're in a bit of a pickle. I didn't realize my stash was this full.
A country that just recently saw an industrial revolution. Oh wait, I'm sorry, a magical revolution. Mages could now produce things faster with magic. Okay, so it's Japan in World War II. This isn't gonna end the same way as Japan, right? Right? Okay, so a generation after this war, Algarve is back, and they are pissed. Algarve annexes the Duchy of Berry, a duchy that split from Algarve after the war, and Algarve wants it back to unite all the Algarvians. Poor Forthweg just gets rolled over. This is a kingdom with an inferior and outdated army. Magically, of course. Forthweg gets invaded and divided between both Algarve and Unkerland. Alright, so you get the point. This is a funny concept. You don't need to read 6 books to assume that Algarve isn't going to win. There were some slight changes here and there, of course. Not everything in the storyline follows the war exactly, but when it comes to the big picture stuff, yeah, it's pretty spot on. Like, King Menzentio, leader of Algarve, goes out in a bunker, downfall style. That is the funniest way any fictional king has ever died. What really is the Darkness series? Is it a fantasy story of its own, or is this just historical fiction? What does the reader walk away with? Is this meant to be a guessing game for which fantasy nation is which? Is this a game I just spoiled? I mean, even if it was, the game kind of gets old after 6 books, right? Then you're weak into reading nothing but characters retelling World War II, with dragons, talking about how bad Algarve is. Spoilers, they get divided into East and West. The Kusamans destroy the capital of Gyeongyos with a very powerful spell. A very powerful spell. I get following World War II closely, but did you need to follow it that closely? I mean, surely Turtledove didn't adapt every event in World War II, right? Right? Can't really say anything specific here because I'm already on the edge of YouTube monetization with this one, so I'm gonna have to spell this out. In this fantasy world, where once again I reiterate, everyone fights with wizard staffs, there is an ethnic group that is targeted by the Algarvians. Yeah, he really stuck to the source material on that one. This group is the Konians. Difference, though, is that in this fantasy world, the Konians are all blonde-haired and blue-eyed. Algarvians don't like Konians because 1,000 years ago, Konians had an ancient empire. So, Konians are basically a mix of the Romans and the Jews. They were the Roman Empire of this world. But now, they're demonized. Also, they look like Aryans. Turtledove really did like his ironic switching. I can just imagine Turtledove sitting in his office congratulating himself over that one. Really makes you think. Pretty sure this gives off many implications that I am sure Turtledove didn't intend. I'm sure there's one implication he certainly didn't think of. Okay, so thousands of years ago, Konians once had a massive empire and controlled everyone. To this day, they are still demonized. They are also a fair skin, light hair, and frankly very Germanic people. So, Eldians from Attack on Titan. Turtledove invented the Eldians. Did Isayama copy Turtledove? I don't think the war should have ended with Algarve being divided. I think it should have ended with all of Derleve being destroyed by Titans. This should have ended with the rumbling, Turtledove, you coward. Finish your stupid book, George. Once again, special thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video. Click on the link in the description to get 83% off your PIA subscription. And if you're nervous to try it out, they have a 30-day...
When we aren't actively engaged in some kind of conflict or war, the military is what is called a force in readiness. They are always preparing and training, waiting for something to happen. And far from being exclusively sent overseas, the military is often utilized for quick responses to handle problems locally, natural disasters for one. As mentioned in previous stories, soldiers could be sent out to set up roadblocks to stop civilians from driving back to their homes during a forest fire. They might even be sent off base to investigate reports of little green men harassing a local family. But they also get called in for violent situations, like riots. And while you'd normally expect this sort of thing to happen on the streets of a city, this story is unique. Smack in the middle of the San Francisco Bay is the tiny island known as Alcatraz. Having started as a military stronghold in the mid-1800s, Alcatraz was slowly converted to a military prison during the Civil War. It was further expanded when new prisoners entered during the Spanish-American War 3 decades later. It was ultimately converted into a federal penitentiary in the 1930s, and you could imagine the kind of guys that the Department of Justice wanted to send to a desolate rock in the middle of the water. The inmates housed at Alcatraz were said to be some of the most dangerous men from any prison anywhere in the United States. Convicted killers, gangsters, outlaws, and various other violent offenders that couldn't be contained anywhere else. Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, Alvin Creepy Karpis, and James Whitey Bulger all called Alcatraz home.
I think I heard of this story. They sent in the Marines, so the inmates took over the prison for, I don't even know, it was like a day or two. They sent in the Marines, and the Marines ended up taking control within like 45 minutes or some crazy shit.
At one point or another. But flying the coop at Alcatraz was far easier said than done. In fact, it was said to be impossible. Even if an inmate managed to get out of the cell block, they were then faced with having to swim up to 2 miles across the San Francisco Bay. If the frigid waters didn't kill them, the powerful tidal currents would. That didn't stop a number of inmates from trying. This is one of those stories. And honestly, you couldn't write a story like this without it sounding like Hollywood made it up. On May 2nd, 1946, a small group of inmates made a break for it. They seized weapons, took hostages, and attempted to shoot their way to freedom. The only thing standing in their way were the guards, and 2 platoons of U.S. Marines who had recently returned from the front lines of the Second World War. This is the incredible story of the Battle of Alcatraz.
They gonna fuck around and find out! Let's see.
The mist which hangs before you,
Offers you a choice,
to pass through,
or to escape.
beyond it are
Stories
which defy
explanation
and fly in the face.
of what we know to be real.
It is a void of both
Reality.
and impossibility.
Of both fact and
Superstition.
You alone are left to discern.
what to believe as you pass through what we call the fog of war.
Lights out, sweethearts. Don't let the bedbugs bite.
Bite me, Warden.
All right, who's the smartass? As the clock struck midnight on December 31st, 1945, the world celebrated the start of 1946 with a renewed sense of hope. So much had changed in the last 6 years, and millions of people were still adjusting to peacetime life after the hardships of World War II. There was a lot of uncertainty. Things already seemed to be heating up between the United States and the Soviet Union, as the 2 superpowers raced to develop their atomic arsenals. But this wasn't enough to dampen the spirits of many Americans as they rang in the new year. Their loved ones were finally coming home from their tours overseas in Europe and the Pacific. The United States had emerged from the war as an economic powerhouse, and opportunities seemed endless. But this didn't apply to the roughly 260 inmates held within the Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. For them, the first day of 1946 was the exact same as the last day of 1945, and the day before that, and every other day. Things didn't exactly change in Alcatraz. Every morning at exactly 6:30, the prisoners were roused by the guards for the day's first head count. From there, daily life was a strict cycle of labor, with only short breaks being granted for meals. Free time was a luxury, and privacy was practically non-existent. There wasn't much that escaped the watchful eyes of the guards and wardens. The routine was constant, consistent, and horribly mundane, enough to drive anybody crazy. And one of the men who was sick of it was prisoner number 415, better known to the inmates and officers as Bernard Coy. Coy was born on February 13th, 1900, in the town of Andertonville, Kentucky. At around 16 years old, he lied about his age to join the U.S. Army. He was then shipped overseas and served his country with distinction during the First World War. He apparently earned a reputation for being an expert marksman. But after the war, things...
Well, it looks like some things changed. Bro, every time I come back... Well, you know what? I actually don't track news on Tarkov, to be honest, dude, even though I play this game all the time. Just been too busy. It looks like I can sell and buy shit for the flea market now, so that's kind of nice. That's actually really fucking nice. I should have started the stream this early. We're going to be watching this video. I got to get accountability of what the fuck I have for my hideout. And... oh man, I have to write this down. See what I can fucking sell, because I have too much nonsense in my stash, dude. We're going to go back to the VOD while I work this, though.
suddenly went downhill. After re-enlisting sometime in the 1920s, Coy was written up for desertion and dishonorably discharged in 1926 after being arrested for burglary in Green Bay, Wisconsin. From there, Coy's life devolved into a series of stints in and out of jail, and things only got worse with the onset of the Great Depression in the 1930s. In March of 1937, Coy was fresh off of a 2-year burglary sentence when he and his 23-year-old cousin held up the Bank of New Haven in Louisville, Kentucky. Armed with a sawed-off shotgun and a pistol, the duo made off with a little over $2,000, but not before the bank teller got a good look at both of their faces. The law caught up with Coy about a month later, and this time, he wouldn't be getting off so easily. On top of the recent bank robbery and his long record of burglaries, police were also able to connect Coy to a recent liquor store robbery. As a result, he was sentenced to 26 years in the Atlanta Federal Correction Institution. But Coy proved himself to be a troublesome inmate. He regularly got into fights, disobeyed the guards, and was busted, along with a few others, for planning a breakout. There was a saying within the correction system familiar to both officers and prisoners. Those who broke the rules went to prison. Those who broke the rules of prison went to Alcatraz. By 1946, Alcatraz had been Coy's home for the past 9 years. Much to the surprise of the guards and wardens familiar with his violent past, it looked as if the career criminal was starting to turn things around. By all accounts, Bernard Coy was the closest thing Alcatraz had to a model prisoner. He didn't start fights, did what he was told, and even used his own experience with the legal system to advise some of his fellow inmates, a kind of cell house lawyer, if you would. In what little downtime he had, Coy took to reading and even became known as a gifted artist. The walls of his 5x9 cell were often decorated with paintings depicting the Kentucky countryside he grew up in. After so many years of his demure behavior, guards felt as if they could trust Coy. Well, at least a bit more than the other prisoners. And this is exactly what the seasoned criminal was aiming for. The inmates sent to Alcatraz were the worst that the American prison system had to offer. As a result, outlets for the prisoners to entertain themselves were often revoked. But the one thing they did have was an in-house library with over 15,000 books and magazines. Thanks to his good behavior, Coy became the library orderly. So while most of the prisoners spent their days working in the kitchens, gardens, laundry, or one of the island's many shops, Coy enjoyed regular access to the main cell block. As he wheeled his cart around, collecting and distributing reading material, Coy began taking note of certain weaknesses in the guards' patrol routes. Security was usually very tight, but on weekdays, most of the inmates were out on their various work details. This left the main cell block almost entirely empty, and what few guards remained seemed to be a little bit more lax. During the day, Coy observed that the main cell block was watched by at least 3 officers. One stood by the entrance to the dining hall to observe the comings and goings of the kitchen staff. This guard carried the keys that allowed greater access to the prison, as well as the outside yard. Although this officer was unarmed, he was covered by 2 other guards who were equipped with rifles. They were stationed in elevated gun galleries that ran the length of the cell block's east and west ends. But Coy noticed that there were moments in their patrol that left the officer on the main floor with the keys unobserved and vulnerable to an ambush. Coy began working on a plan.
He gonna ambush the fuck out of someone.
Over the course of several months, Coy worked alongside 3 other inmates to plot out every aspect of their escape. While the general hierarchy of the group is debated, it is thought that Coy's primary confidants were inmates Joseph Kretzer and Marvin Hubbard. Kretzer was a West Coast gangster who was currently serving a life term for bank robbery and second-degree murder. Hubbard was sent to Alcatraz after being involved in a prison riot and for repeated escapes from other jails. His charges included kidnapping, grand theft auto, and stealing guns. The 4th member of the group was Clarence Carnes, otherwise known as the Choctaw Kid. At just 18 years old, Carnes was the youngest inmate in Alcatraz history and was already a stone-cold killer. He was serving a life sentence, plus an additional 104 years for first-degree murder, assault of a federal employee, and kidnapping. These 4 men were a far cry from the A-Team, but their planning was meticulous. Step 1 would see Coy and Hubbard wait for the opportunity to overpower the lone officer guarding the cell block. Once he was unconscious, they would take his keys and free Kretzer and Carnes. From there, Coy would climb his way up to the western gun gallery and find a way to pry open the bars just enough for him to squeeze through. He'd probably have to lose a few pounds to pull this off. Once up in the gallery, Coy would somehow have to get the drop on the lone guard posted there. When this guard was incapacitated, Coy, now armed with the guard's rifle, would move along the gun gallery towards the sealed-off isolation wing where the last guard was on patrol. With this final officer subdued, they'd have full control of the cell block, at least for a few minutes. Taking the guards with them as hostages, the inmates would use the keys to gain access to the prison yard. On paper, it all seemed pretty straightforward. And on May 2nd, 1946, Coy and his men finally put their plan into action. But being a former soldier, Coy should have known that no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. At around 1:30,
I should have done this before I even got the stream up. We have it up and running, so I want to keep it up. I just what I'm gonna end up doing is emptying out one of my junk boxes, and I need to find out. So let's say I have like 2 separate stations inside my hideout that need wires. I will say 10 and 10. Well, as far as I'm tracking, I have a mark that I need to find them. But maybe I have like 25, so I have 5 excess wires. And those are just chilling in my stash, filling up room, and it's driving me crazy. But it's a bit tedious. It takes like 30 minutes or so. I gotta find out what I have, what I need, and the rest of the shit I'm fucking selling.
3 p.m., Corrections Officer William A. Miller found himself patrolling the primary cell block. With most of the inmates out and at various workstations, there really wasn't much for him to do, not that he was complaining. Standing guard over some of the most dangerous men in America was a stressful job, and he was grateful for any lulls in the action. A prisoner then approached him from the other side of the barred dining hall door. It was the familiar face of Marvin Hubbard. As a kitchen orderly, it wasn't uncommon for Hubbard to run errands between the dining hall and the cell block. So, just as he had done 100 times before, Miller let Hubbard through the security door and proceeded to pat him down. But before he knew it, Miller was rushed from behind and slammed into the ground. Coy and Hubbard started laying into him with their fists and boots until he stopped moving. Hubbard grabbed his set of keys and went off to free Kretzer and Carnes. Coy stayed behind, standing guard over Miller, breathing deeply as he prepared for the next step of the plan. Stripping off his shirt, Coy smeared himself in axle grease that he had swiped from one of the shops. Then he started to climb up the bars towards the West Gun Gallery. His accomplices looked on anxiously, praying that the guard posted on the gallery wasn't on his way back. Once in position, Coy stuck an improvised spreading device between the bars and began prying them apart. It worked, but only gave him a few extra inches to work with. For this part of the job, Coy had deliberately starved himself for a number of weeks. He hoped that the weight loss combined with the axle grease would give him just enough leeway to slip through the bars. He was thrilled when it actually worked. Coy entered the empty gun gallery and gave his pals down below the signal to start a commotion. As they hollered in the cell block, Coy took up an ambush position as Officer Bert Birch hustled back to the gallery. Coy caught the man flat-footed, wrestling Birch to the ground and strangling him into unconsciousness with his own necktie. He then handcuffed the limp officer to the bars. After looting Birch of his weapons, Coy raided the rest of the gallery. When he reappeared through the bars, he dropped an M1911 pistol to his accomplices, as well as ammunition and several gas billy clubs. Coy then shouldered Birch's Springfield rifle and moved south along the gallery towards the isolation wing in D block. Bursting through the steel door that separated the wing from the rest of the cell block, Coy quickly overpowered Officer Cecil Corwin and forced him to open all the cells in the prison. As the door slid open, what few inmates remained in their cells stepped out into the cell block to see what all the commotion was about. When they saw 4 armed convicts shoving 2 officers into cell C402, they immediately knew what was going on and wanted no part in it. While most of the men quietly stepped back into their cells, 2 of them saw this as their opportunity to escape. They eagerly joined the group of 4, bringing their number to 6. One was a convicted cop killer named Myron Thompson, and the other a low-IQ bank robber named Sam Shockley. For the convicts, the plan was going well, maybe even too well. They had the keys, weapons, and hostages. Now they just had to break out into the yard, down to the boat launch, and they would be home free. But this is when things started to quickly fall apart. None of the keys they had stolen worked on the door that led out to the yard. Although it was against regulation, the guard they had knocked out, William Miller, had previously taken the yard key off of the ring and kept it in his pocket. He would often do this so he could open the door for the kitchen staff without bothering the galley guards on their break. Now that he was conscious and had been forced into a prison cell by the convicts, Miller watched the men frantically trying to open the door to the yard. When they realized the key wasn't on the ring, he knew they might come back to him and find the key in his pocket, so Miller quickly hid the key in the cell's toilet. Sure enough, growing more anxious and desperate by the second, Kretzer returned to the cell and demanded that Miller tell him where the key was. Miller said he didn't know. Furious, Kretzer, Shockley, and Thompson started pummeling him. To make matters worse, the other prison guards were beginning to notice the absence of the first 3 guards. One by one, 6 more guards came into the cell block searching for the missing men, only to be caught at gunpoint by the convicts and tossed into cells C402 and 403. Eventually, Kretzer managed to locate the missing key, either finding it in the toilet by luck or beating the answer out of Miller. But by that point, the lock had been so badly jammed by the prisoner's previous attempts to open it that the key was totally useless. The men were completely trapped inside the cell block, and it was only a matter of time before the warden got wise to what was happening. Coy unslung his rifle and checked the chamber. As had so often happened on the front lines, it was time for a change in strategy. Taking up a position in the West Gun Gallery, Coy started firing out of the D-block windows towards the nearby guard towers. His reasons for this aren't entirely clear. Maybe he intended to pick off the tower guards to clear a path for a mad dash to the boat, or perhaps he knew the jig was up and resolved to just fight it out to the end. After receiving word that some of his men were taking accurate gunfire from D-block, Associate Warden Ed Miller took hold of a gas club and went to investigate. He was soon chased away from the cell block by a barrage of gunfire and reported the situation to Alcatraz's warden, James A. Johnston. The attention of the people walking along the San Francisco waterfront was, at that point, drawn towards the distant prison as the eerie wailing sound of an alarm echoed across the bay. Soon they could see smoke, flashes of tracer rounds, and could just make out the faint crackle of gunfire that seemed to be growing more and more intense. It was as if a battle was being fought inside the prison walls. As Coy traded fire with the ever-increasing number of officers, Kretzer, Thompson, and Shockley turned their attention to the 8 captured guards being held in C Block. The initial plan was to use them as leverage for safe passage to the boat launch, but now that that plan was out of the window, Shockley and Thompson urged Kretzer to kill them. Speaking to the Marine Corps publication, Leatherneck Magazine, in a later interview, one of the hostages, prison guard Robert R. Baker, described what followed as Kretzer took hold of his 1911.
He ran up to where we were in a cell and poked his pistol through the bars and started firing. No one could count the shots or had any time to think. I fell to the floor when I was hit, and I heard the others hit the floor around me. It really was terrifying.
Bullets struck all 8 of the officers. William Miller, who on top of being brutally beaten several times, was now bleeding profusely from 2 gunshot wounds. But even as their blood pooled on the concrete floor, the men stayed calm and did their best to fake being dead. The only thing they could do was hold on and pray that help was on the way. Fortunately for them, it was. Not long after sounding the alarm, Warden Johnston sent word of the crisis to the nearby Treasure Island Naval Station. The Coast Guard had already been mustered, and now the Marines were on the way.
Ooh, they about to get fucked up, dude.
Sounds like the welcome committee is getting ready for us, boys. Say, don't this kind of remind you of Iwo Jima?
Nah, Iwo was hell. This I think we can handle. Jeez, talk about a homecoming, eh, Skipper? We were just blasting the Japanese out of their holes a few months ago. Now we're helping to clean up the Fed's prize loony bin.
Who do you think's crazier? The Japanese or the guys trying to bust out of this place? Odds gotta be 1,000,000 to 1 easy, and they still went for it. They're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid.
It's just another island, boys. Nothing more, nothing less. Don't go underestimate these guys just because they're cons, though. They've done their fair share of killing as well. All right, I want everyone squared away and ready for anything when we land.
Aye, sir.
Aye, sir.
As Warrant Officer Charles Lafayette Buckner landed on Alcatraz and led his Marines up the northern slopes toward the main cell house, he couldn't shake the sense of unwelcome familiarity. It wasn't long ago that this veteran officer was leading his men against the Japanese at places like Guam, Bougainville, and Okinawa. He had seen some of the worst the war had to offer and had been awarded the Silver Star and Purple Heart for his troubles. Now, back on American soil, the air was once again filled with the crackle of gunfire coming from the far side of the island. Just another beautiful day in the Corps. Buckner's first order of business was to touch base with the warden in order to get a sense of the tactical situation and where he should deploy his troops. When later speaking to reporter Stanton Delaplane of the San Francisco Chronicle, Johnston recalled the moment the Marines came ashore.
The Marines asked if we wanted help, and when I said I could use 20 men to guard the prisoners in the yard, they came over zigzagging like it was Iwo Jima or something. They helped a lot.
As the Marines aided the officers' guard and set up sleeping arrangements for the displaced inmates, Johnston began to organize a rescue mission for the 8 officers being held somewhere in the cell block. A little after 7 p.m., the Marines looked on as an assault team of heavily armed officers made their way to the ground floor entrance of the West Gun Gallery. As the rescue team entered the gallery, they found themselves on the ground floor of D Block. As they began to ascend the stairs to the upper levels, they noticed everything had fallen strangely quiet. They gripped their weapons tight and pressed on, unaware that Coy and Kretzer were watching from concealed firing positions. D Block suddenly exploded with the sounds of gunfire and screams as the officers walked straight into a kill zone. Tightly packed together in the narrow gun gallery, they made easy targets. The officers that weren't immediately gunned down attempted to shoot back or drag their wounded buddies down the stairs toward the exit. Covering his fellow officers as they made their retreat was Senior Officer Harold Stites. Unlike some of the younger guards, this wasn't Stites' first rodeo. He'd served with the Federal Bureau of Prisons for over 23 years and was a veteran of the First World War. He was even credited with putting an end to a previous escape attempt in 1938, single-handedly killing 2 of the 3 rogue inmates who had just mortally wounded a fellow officer. As he returned Coy and Kretzer's fire, Stites was struck several times. He fell lifelessly on the steel catwalk and was among the last to be dragged out of the cell block. The scene unfolding outside the prison was horrific. Every member of the rescue team was badly wounded. Harold Stites, veteran officer, soldier, beloved husband, and father of 4 children, was now dead. The sight of the bloodied men mourning their fallen comrade brought back painful memories for the Marines. It also filled them with a powerful resolve. Buckner was tired of being on the sidelines. Both he and his Marines were itching to do what they did best. That night, they'd get their chance. After the failure of the first rescue mission, Warden Johnston cut power to the main cell house and suspended all further attempts until after dark. Later that evening, a second rescue team made their way into the prison. Instead of entering via D Block, where the convicts had likely dug in, the officers took advantage of the dark and quietly entered the main cell block. As they searched cell by cell for the 8 captive guards, the rescue party was covered by Marines and guards posted up in the East Gun Gallery, as well as the narrow visitation windows directly beneath them. Making their way through the dark cell house, the officers finally located their missing colleagues in C Block. Though they were all badly wounded, they were miraculously still alive. The next few minutes were tense as the officers attempted to remove the 8 wounded hostages without rousing the attention of the convicts. Unfortunately, the men did hear them moving through the cell block, and a pitched gunfight broke out. Covering the officers alongside his Marines, Buckner was moved by the courage displayed by the guards attempting to save their friends. He expressed his thoughts in a later radio interview.
In the best Marine tradition, those guards braved the fire of convicts to rescue their wounded comrades. They'd all make good Marines.
As soon as the hostages were safe, the Marines and guards covering them pulled back. Buckner then gave the order for his men, positioned on the island's southern slopes, to open fire on D Block with everything they had. And boy did they ever. From sunup to sundown on May 3rd, the Marines let loose on the convicts. M1 rifles, Browning automatics, Thompson submachine guns, firepower far greater than anything the guards had. Buckner's strategy was simple and was one he and his men had used countless times against entrenched Japanese soldiers. Using overwhelming firepower and plenty of grenades, the Marines hoped to dislodge the convicts from their D-block positions. Once this was done, they would work to back the cons into a corner where they could be bombarded into submission or annihilated altogether. Over the course of this day-long siege, it's thought that the Marines lobbed or fired around 500 grenades into the cell block. The bombardment was so intense that those watching from across the bay thought the convicts must be being pummeled by bazooka or mortar rounds. Overkill or not, it worked like a charm. The convicts abandoned D-block under fire and took up new positions along C-block in the main cell house. By this point, things really weren't looking too good for Coy, Kretzer, and Hubbard. After seeing the hopelessness of their situation, Shockley, Thompson, and Carnes abandoned the fight and returned to their cells, but Coy and his pals remained defiant. The situation only got worse when the Marines, led personally by Buckner, made their way up onto the prison's roof and chiseled several small holes into the concrete ceiling above C-block. Grenades rained down on the cons, exploding midair, on the ground, and among the catwalks. Some Marines even stuck the barrels of their weapons through and opened fire. The near-constant explosions ruptured pipes, and water was now flooding the cell block. Time and time again, the officers and Marines called on the convicts to surrender. But as Private First Class Robert Prosser recalled in Leatherneck magazine, the men had no interest in giving up.
We surrender, don't do that again, don't, were among the cries that echoed back through the hole in the roof. A guard approached cautiously to receive the surrendered weapons and received instead a defiant shot, which had apparently been fired blindly by a now frenzied con.
Unable to hold on to their elevated C-block positions, the convicts once again retreated. This time they squeezed their way into a narrow utility corridor that ran through the middle of the C-block cells. They were now better shielded from the grenades, but there was nowhere left to run, just as the Marines intended. The corrections officer once again took the lead, securing C-block and sealing off both ends of the utility corridor. Armed with shotguns, the two groups took turns spraying the narrow corridor with gunfire. They kept this up until the early morning of May 4th. The convicts had stopped returning fire, and all attempts by the officers to call out to them were met with total silence. Cautiously, they made their way into the corridor. Spaced out along the narrow hall, riddled with bullets and shrapnel, were the bodies of Joseph Kretzer, Marvin Hubbard, and Bernard Coy. Coy was said to be frozen in rigor mortis, his hands positioned as if he was still gripping a non-existent rifle. The Battle of Alcatraz was over. When silence returned to Alcatraz, 3 inmates had been killed, and 14 officers were wounded. The Federal Bureau of Prisons laid 2 of their own to rest, Officer Harold Stites and William Miller. Miller would succumb to his injuries not long after being rescued, but not before naming Kretzer as the man who shot him and his fellow officers. Miller was survived by his mother, his wife, and 2 children. Despite abandoning the escape, Myron Thompson and Sam Shockley were sentenced to death on the back of damning testimony. According to the officers they held captive, it was Shockley and Thompson that encouraged Kretzer to go through with his attempted execution of the hostages. They would both meet their end in the gas chamber of San Quentin Penitentiary on December 3, 1948. Clarence Carnes, the Choctaw Kid, was allowed to live out the rest of his life sentence. He would pass away behind bars in 1988 from AIDS at the age of 61. The Battle of Alcatraz is surprisingly a little-known chapter of the prison's history. Even as a Marine, I'd never heard about this until recently, and there's very few parts of our Marine Corps history that we don't find a reason to get hyped up about. This event seems to have fallen to the wayside in the wake of higher-profile escape attempts, like the 1962 breakout that was later immortalized in the 1979 Clint Eastwood film, Escape from Alcatraz. Alcatraz closed its doors as a prison in 1963, but it's now a must-see tourist attraction for anyone visiting San Francisco. You can actually still see the impact and fragmentation marks from some of the grenades that were thrown into the C-block cutoff. At the time, the Marines didn't get much recognition for their part in the battle. There's no record of any awards or official citations being made, but they took the whole thing in stride. Some of them joked that they should have all been awarded Alcatraz campaign ribbons. And for the design, they suggested black and gray horizontal stripes, resembling prison uniforms.
That would be a cool fucking ribbon to have on your chest. Let's see. About halfway there right now. I'll find something else. Operation High Jump. What is this?
With how tight-lipped our militaries and respective governments tend to be, historical records of military expeditions, operations, and discoveries are often trapped behind protective barriers, or otherwise their published pages have been heavily redacted with lines of black ink. This lack of overall transparency, combined with some very real mysteries encountered by our militaries, often invites speculation as to what the true nature of these secretive missions and discoveries really is, and what was seen by those involved. And this is the case with the well-known American military expedition to Antarctica in 1947. On the surface, it was nothing more than routine surveys and a cold weather training exercise. But over the last 80 years, there are some that believe that our governments are hiding something, that the naval personnel sent to Antarctica found something in the ice. Whether it was a hidden Nazi fortress protected by advanced weaponry, or an entirely different race of highly advanced ancient beings living deep below the Earth's surface, this is the story of Operation High Jump and the discovery of Hollow Earth.
Dun 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 dun.
The mist which hangs before you,
Offers you a choice.
to pass through,
Or to escape.
beyond it,
Stories
which defy
explanation.
and fly in the face.
Of what we know to be real.
It is a void of both reality and impossibility.
Of both fact and superstition.
You alone are left to discern
What to believe as you pass through what we call the fog of war.
Ich glaube, meine Eier sind an der Innenseite meines Beins gefroren. Und wir werden alle bei diesem kalten Wetter sterben.
Welcome to the Antarctic. Located at the southernmost point on the globe, Antarctica is the world's 5th largest continent, consisting of 5.5 million square miles of what can only be described as polar desert. Despite its large size, the continent is mostly uninhabited. Unless you're a penguin, a marine mammal, or a form of moss, few species are adapted to survive here. Antarctica is one of the most hostile environments on Earth. With the strongest winds on the planet, its temperatures can plunge as low as negative 128 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 89.2 degrees Celsius. Despite these facts, Antarctica has long been the target of human interest. For many explorers, researchers, and opportunists from all over the world, the Antarctic has been considered the world's final frontier of exploration. It was seen as an untouched land, potentially flowing with natural resources. The nation who managed to conquer it could bring on itself great prestige and economic wealth. In the early years of the 19th century, the competing European powers of the day would launch numerous expeditions south in what became known as the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. The turn of the 20th century would see another surge in Antarctic expeditions. British, French, Belgian, Norwegian, Swedish, Japanese, and American flags were raised on the continent. While none of these countries made any formal territorial claims, a number of them succeeded in maintaining a semi-permanent presence in the form of small research stations or fisheries. The Norwegian expeditions were especially successful, with Norway maintaining a fleet of whaling vessels operating out of a base on the Antarctic coast. But between these two periods of exploration, during the late 1930s, a much more infamous character had his eyes set on the continent's resources: Adolf Hitler. By the winter of 1938, Hitler and the Nazi hierarchy knew that the war was inevitable. As a result, the Germans began to search for a means to self-sustain their natural resources. Since hostilities hadn't broken out yet, Germany still relied on trade with other countries in order to feed its economy and to provide its citizens with various goods. Many of these goods, such as butter, milk, cream, lard, and margarine, relied heavily on imports of various oils and fat. These comestibles would certainly be cut off as soon as their invasions began. Looking to provide their own supply, the Nazis, watching the success of the Norwegian whaling industry, organized an expedition south, hoping to capitalize on the same Antarctic fishing grounds. The mission was considered top secret and was led by Captain Alfred Richer, a decorated naval veteran of the First World War. He was tasked with locating a suitable spot on the frigid coastline to construct a whaling base. The expedition would be spearheaded by a single ship, the MS Schwabenland, and contained a crew of 82 experienced scientists, officers, and enlisted men, as well as 2 Dornier flying boats. Setting sail from Hamburg in December of 1938, the Schwabenland would arrive off the Antarctic coast a month later, the crew disembarking in an area dubbed Queen Maud Land by previous expeditions. They began to scout the area, making great use of their 2 float planes in order to survey the largely unexplored land. It was no small task. Through a series of flights, they would be covering an area far larger than the size of their German homeland. Planting the Nazi flag in the snow, the jubilant crew declared the region New Schwabenland after their ship. Aside from gathering some valuable scientific data, the Nazis' expedition failed in its mission. Unable to find a suitable location to host a whaling base, the men set sail back to Germany in January of 1939. With the outbreak of the war months later, on September 1st, 1939, Hitler abandoned the idea of maintaining a presence in the Antarctic. Well, at least that's what official documentation says. While the Nazis' Antarctic expedition was reportedly conducted with the express purpose of setting up fishing operations, this is just the kind of thing any covert military operation would do: create a believable cover story. Some have speculated the mission's objectives were something much worse than keeping the German shelves stocked with butter. According to these rumors, the Nazis never left Antarctica and had no plans to do so, not until they found what they were actually looking for, something that many today would consider a complete myth. It should come as no surprise that the Nazis, especially Hitler himself, held some incredibly strange beliefs. Many high-ranking Nazis had a great interest in mysticism, ancient folklore, and occult beliefs, some of which were the foundation of their superiority complexes and their lesser view of other humans. A core part of Nazi ideology is centered around the existence of an ancient master race, the Aryans. The term Aryan does refer to a legitimate group of ancient Indo-European peoples, but it's a term which, like the Nazis' abuse of the swastika symbol, was misappropriated by the Nazis to change its original meaning. In Nazi mythology, their version of the ancient Aryan people gave rise to all aspects of modern civilization, everything from sophisticated technology to fine arts. Hitler believed that the German people were directly descended from this powerful race, and that this could be scientifically proven through anthropological study, and that, he argued, made them superior to all others. The Nazis were so convicted by this belief that they founded an entire organization whose only purpose was to find evidence validating it. The organization was known as the Ahnenerbe, the Ancestral Heritage Society for the Study of the History of Primeval Ideas. The German scholars assigned to it came from diverse disciplines. Through studying ancient cultures, mystic rituals, and occult practices, they worked to construct a historical foundation that linked modern Germans to the Aryan bloodlines. Despite engaging in what was widely seen as pseudoscience by the rest of the world's scientific communities, the Nazis dedicated large amounts of Germany's resources to Ahnenerbe expeditions, even during wartime. But an ancient race of godlike humans wasn't their only focus. Among their many beliefs, there was one known as the Hollow Earth Theory. Championed by Nazi figureheads like Heinrich Himmler and archaeologist Rolf Hune, the Hollow Earth Theory had first been presented hundreds of years earlier by an English astronomer, mathematician, and physicist, Edmund Halley. In 1692, Halley proposed that the Earth might consist of a hollow shell about 800 kilometers or 500 miles thick. Within that shell were two other layers, each divided by its own atmosphere, followed by a core at the planet's center. These inner shells rotated at different speeds and had their own magnetic poles. Halley suggested that this is what could be responsible for strange compass readings experienced by sailing ships. He would further speculate that the gases released by the atmospheres contained within these inner layers manifested in the form of the aurora borealis. In the following centuries, supporters of Halley's theory would add to the Hollow Earth narrative. One of these was John Cleves Sims Jr., a former U.S. Army captain and veteran of the War of 1812. According to Sims, the space between the Earth's inner shells, possessing their own atmospheres, could possibly host life, or entire undiscovered ecosystems, possibly even advanced civilizations. Sims would even go on to claim that this unseen world could even be accessed from the surface at two large openings, one in the North Pole and one in the South, hidden below the Antarctic ice. Following these theories and their own desire to legitimize their beliefs, is it possible then that the Nazis, under the cover of setting up a fishing base, used their time in Antarctica to search for evidence of Hollow Earth? Or maybe it was simply the first of many covert expeditions meant to expand the Third Reich's presence on the continent, turning the massive ice into an impenetrable fortress.
Fucking dope.
On May 7, 1945, the war in Europe came to an end with the surrender of Nazi Germany. While thousands of German soldiers marched into Allied and Soviet captivity, certain members of the Nazi Party, now wanted men for their various war crimes, sought to escape justice. Utilizing sophisticated escape networks known as rat lines, numerous high-ranking Nazi officials were smuggled out of Europe by the SS. Once clear of Allied forces, the fugitives would be placed aboard U-boats or other vessels bound for safe havens in South America. Speculation about the true scale of this operation intensified when 2 months after the Nazi surrender, a German U-boat designated U-530 arrived in the Argentine naval base of Mar del Plata. The arrival of the submarine gave rise to a number of rumors, some stating that the U-boat had surrendered only after transporting a number of prominent Nazi figures, including Hitler and his wife Eva Braun and Martin Bormann, to the coast of Patagonia or the Antarctic. About a week after the sub's arrival, Ladislas Sabo, a Hungarian-born Jewish man, then residing in Argentina, would further fan the flames of these theories. In an article written for a local newspaper, Sabo wrote a detailed account of how Hitler and his closest affiliates escaped Germany, a claim he would later double down on in his 1947 book titled Hitler is Alive. Sabo's article took the world by storm, and with the arrival of yet another U-boat in Mar del Plata in August of 1945, this being U-977, the theories soon took on a life of their own. With each new version of the story, the legend of the Nazi Antarctic base only grew larger. In some renditions, the base serves as a kind of vault, housing the cremated ashes of Adolf Hitler, which had been smuggled out of Berlin just before its fall to the Soviets. Hidden alongside these ashes are the many treasures and priceless artworks looted by the Nazis during their conquests. Some even speculated that the Nazi regime was alive and thriving beneath the Antarctic ice, constructing a fortress from which they could rebuild the Third Reich. While there were many who scoffed at these claims, theorists pointed to a series of quotes supposedly uttered by Karl Dönitz, the commander-in-chief of the German Navy. According to authors Colonel Howard A. Buchner and Captain Wilhelm Bernhardt, themselves both German veterans of World War II, Dönitz was quoted in 1943 as saying,
"The German submarine fleet is proud of having built for the Führer, in another part of the world, a Shangri-La on land, an impregnable fortress."
For those who believe in the Antarctic base's existence, it is the final bastion of Nazi resistance. Sheltered within the ice, the quote-unquote last battalion stood ready to fight, armed with some of the Reich's most lethal and cutting-edge weaponry. As they waited for the enemy, German scientists are said to have continued their work on various prototype vehicles smuggled out of Germany, some of which, according to various rumors, were driven by anti-gravity technology far beyond that of their Allied and Soviet counterparts.
Aliens.
But if such a massive operation even existed, it certainly wouldn't take long for Germany's enemies to notice and take action. The Third Reich was bad enough, but a fourth? Any possibility of the Nazis making a comeback would need to be put down immediately. And it is here that the incredible story of Operation High Jump begins in 1946. But rest assured, this is not where the story of Hollow Earth ends. Quite the contrary.
Yo, what up,
It only
baby girl?
gets
You
deeper.
feeling better?
I am. But I will be back here in a little bit. Right now, I'm just taking care of my hideout stuff. So if you want to run some raids here in a little bit or whatnot, tag along.
Yeah, we'll see. I was just checking to see if you're feeling better.
I was feeling good yesterday. I was just fucking tired, man, and just kind of fed up with everyone. So I just sent them down south. But no, I'm good, man. Yesterday was a long day.
I
Today
feel
was a
that.
long day, but today was a good day though. Wasn't too bad. But yeah, give me maybe like 20 more minutes, dude. Unfortunately, I got the stream up right now, and I forgot I had to do some shit in my hideout and getting accountability for my shit I have, dude. Goddamn confusing, man. I keep picking up shit that I already have, but it's whatever. I need to find out what I need and kind of go from there. But I'll be ready to go here in about 20 minutes. Have you played Arena today?
Yes, sir. No, I just woke up from a nap. I'll probably start with that.
I could not find a fucking match earlier, so I don't know. I just slid over, and then I remembered I had to do some shit for.
What level are you?
Oh, I'm still 25. I didn't even gain a
we're
level
same
yesterday,
level
man.
now.
Are we? Nice. Making some Did you make some progress, man, or did you uninstall?
Yeah, I uninstalled and reinstalled.
Fuck yeah,
Well,
dude.
well, no, I uninstalled due to the fucking bitch ass bug of, you know how when you went to go build a gun and you'd click a symbol, and you're supposed to be able to buy from traders.
Yep.
Yeah, I got tired of that. That was setting me off while I was doing setup.
Oh yeah. Well, they fixed that though. That was an issue with all of us though.
Hang, I got it fixed before anybody else did because I uninstalled and reinstalled.
Maybe that was just when the update happened. Did you get it fixed yesterday?
No, I had it fixed that night.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, before the update came out.
That's fair. I don't know. It started working for me yesterday, dude. So I was like, all right, nope. Because yeah, we were having to buy the parts individually and putting them on, dude. It was fucking cracked.
Yeah, they did the update after I got it fixed, bro. That honestly set me off too. It was like, oh, okay, now that I got it fixed, oh, you got to fix it for everybody, huh?
The rest of the peasants are getting it fixed, dude. Yeah, that's fair. All right, 9 of 10 relays. Well, you got done with setup though, right? You got done with that like 2 days ago.
Yeah, and I got a lot of shoreline quests done too.
I feel it.
What shoreline quest are you on?
I've only done a handful, to be honest, man. I'm not even too pressed about shoreline quests just yet.
Okay, I might have some of the keys that you need, depending on where you're at with them, so just let me know instead of buying them, because they're fucking expensive.
Well, you know what I just found out today? Looks like the reason why I'm getting accountability of my shit inside of the hideout is it looks like we can I even said this the first day of wipe. I'm like, dude, people are going to bitch that you can't buy barter items. No fucking shit. People bitched. It was corrected. What is this, the 5th or 6th day of wipe? When more people have access to the fleet?
No. All right. Go click a random ass item on your hideout, like double click it. It will tell you that you can post and buy it on Flea at a certain level.
Well, all I'm saying is, so like 25 didn't unlock it, so a lot of them were 30 and 35 or whatever. And outside of a select few items, I can buy like 95% of the items I need for my hideout again.
Yep.
And yeah, that shit was
pissing
me off too.
It's level locked. It's level locked. It's not like it was banned off Fleet. It's level locked.
No, yeah, I know that. So either they got rid of the level lock or they just lowered the fuck out of it down to 15 or 20 or whatever it was, because the only threshold I hadn't hit was 30, and I'm only level 25, so I was expecting a couple days till I hit it, and then I hop on a day, and yeah, that's why I'm organizing what I need for my hideout, because I don't need all this fucking nonsense. So
yeah, they're just trying to slow down progression. That's all it was.
I feel it.
Right.
Well, let me get back to it. I'm almost done.
Yes, sir.
GG. Alright, what the fuck did I just do?
Operation High Jump is a known and documented fact. The operation was launched on August 26, 1946, and was set to be the largest Antarctic expedition in history. Spearheaded by the U.S. Navy, the assembled task force was composed of 70 vessels, including icebreakers, supply ships, destroyers, submarines, and the aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea. Transported by the fleet were 33 aircraft, including a few helicopters, and 4,700 men ready to tackle the challenges of the Antarctic. Over the course of the 6-month expedition, the Navy hoped to accomplish a number of objectives, primarily centered around High Jump's official status as a training mission. American personnel would spend time training in Antarctic survival and warfare, testing not only their own endurance, but also their equipment against extreme...
I got some people that have their Arctic badge, and I think jungle too. I don't even know what they did to get those, to be honest. I think it's the Arctic one. It's probably somewhere up in Alaska.
Polar climate. At the same time, the Navy hoped to determine the possibility of establishing and maintaining air bases on the continent, thereby expanding American sovereignty over the Antarctic. Leading the expedition from the bridge of the USS Philippine Sea was Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, Jr. Long before taking part in Operation High Jump, Admiral Byrd was no stranger to Antarctica and polar exploration. In 1926, Byrd, then a young officer in the early days of naval aviation, was credited with being one of the first men to successfully fly to the North Pole in a grueling 15-hour flight. Accomplishing this would make Byrd a national hero and earn him and his fellow pilot, Floyd Bennett, the Congressional Medal of Honor. 2 years later, Byrd's interest in polar exploration would take him south towards the Antarctic. Leading a small group of explorers, Byrd's expedition would construct a small base, dubbed Little America, on the Ross Ice Shelf. This was the same region that Operation High Jump would later take place. Beginning in late August of 1946, the historical timeline for Operation High Jump states that the American task force arrived in the Antarctic in late December. Once there, training and survey operations soon began as planned. However, the mission, originally meant to last 6 months, was scrubbed much sooner, with the fleet sailing back into American waters by February the following year. The Navy's reasons for calling the mission off were quite reasonable. The Antarctic winter had come in early, and conditions were just too dangerous to conduct any exercises. But during an interview with International News Service journalist Lee Van Atta, Rear Admiral Byrd said a few things that struck readers as unusual. The interview appeared in the Wednesday, March 5, 1947 edition of the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio. In it, Lee recalls his discussion with Byrd.
Admiral Byrd declared today that it was imperative for the United States to initiate immediate defense measures against hostile regions. Furthermore, Byrd stated that he didn't want to frighten anyone unduly, but that it was a bitter reality that in case of a new war, the continental United States would be attacked by flying objects, which could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds.
Or at least, that is what some people who read the article may have translated it to say. The original article was written in Spanish, and the line about flying objects reads as follows. El almirante explicó que no quiere asustar a nadie, pero es una verdad amarga que, en el caso de una nueva guerra, los Estados Unidos podrían ser atacados por aviones que pueden volar sobre uno o los dos polos. Correctly translated, the term aviones is the Spanish word for aircraft, and que pueden volar sobre uno o los dos polos doesn't mean which could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds, but rather it means that can fly over one or both poles. With this being 1947, right after the end of World War II, with the dawn of the nuclear age and the race for nuclear weapons currently taking place, it seems obvious that Admiral Byrd was saying that a future enemy, perhaps the Communist Soviet Union, could potentially attack the US by flying over the North Pole, which had previously been considered too hazardous and difficult to fly. But for those who took the Admiral's words in the article to refer to flying objects, they were taken as an ominous warning. What was it about the Antarctic that made Byrd come to this conclusion? Did the Navy find something while they were there? Something that could pose a direct military threat to the United States? According to a mysterious KGB report declassified by the Soviets in 1991, that was exactly the case. Because Operation High Jump wasn't a simple Antarctic training exercise. That was only a cover story. The Navy's actual intent for the mission was to locate and destroy a secret Nazi base. A Nazi base that housed incredibly advanced aircraft. Among the other various speculations and interpretations of the events of Operation High Jump, in 2006, a Russian documentary was aired titled Operation UFO: Nazis in Antarctica. This documentary explores various conspiracy theories, including the idea that the expedition was not solely for scientific research, but also aimed at uncovering secret Nazi bases in Antarctica. The documentary was based on the declassified KGB intelligence report from 1991, a report that speaks of a dramatic World War II confrontation between the American naval fleet and a squadron of advanced German aircraft. The incident began when the U.S. task force cruised through the Weddell Sea. Men aboard the destroyer USS Brownson soon took notice of a cluster of 5 lights in the far distance. They appeared to belong to some sort of unidentified aircraft, now on course to intercept the incoming ships. Soon they were close enough to be picked up on the Brownson's radar. The 5 unknown aircraft broke formation and flew over the American fleet at low altitude, displaying incredible speed and agility as they maneuvered around the tightly packed ships. The American sailors were left dumbstruck by the craft, which they described as being saucer-shaped and aggressive in their flight patterns. What's more, the aircraft had a distinguishable marking on their hulls, a swastika. Growing more and more anxious, the captain of the USS Brownson finally reached his limit, ordering his gunners to knock these mysterious planes out of the sky. The thunder of the destroyer's guns was soon followed by the rest of the fleet, the swift aircraft then returning fire. But rather than firing bullets or projectiles, their ships emitted beams of intense light and heat that melted and burned anything they touched. All the American aircraft launched to counter these German saucers were swiftly knocked out of the sky, while another destroyer, the USS Maddox, was sunk. Fires ignited by the German aircraft reached her primary magazine. The resulting explosion tore the ship apart and reportedly killed all men on board. While badly mauled by the air attack, the American fleet finally managed to shoot down one of the advanced German craft. The kill was claimed by the submarine USS Senate, whose crew managed to land a direct hit on one of the low-flying crafts with her deck gun. The flaming saucer spun wildly out of control, slamming into the icy waters before erupting in a massive secondary explosion. This was only a small victory. The American force was hopelessly outgunned and sustaining heavy casualties. With no other choice, a retreat was sounded, and what remained of the fleet limped back out to sea. The report then concluded that since the American fleet was unable to successfully destroy the Nazis' Antarctic fortifications through conventional means, the US government resorted to a far more devastating approach. Pulling from its ever-growing stockpile of nuclear weapons, the Americans would deliver the final blow by way of nuclear bombardment. 3 atomic weapons were said to have been dropped in Antarctica. They made quick work of the Nazis' hidden fortifications, burying them deep beneath the ice. Now, if anyone thought the story wasn't convoluted enough by this point, it keeps going.
Admiral, I still can't get through. Nothing's working. No signal, no static. It's like the whole sector's just dead.
That doesn't make sense, Carter. Keep trying. Maybe boost the power. Something has to get through. But they're never
Boost
gonna
the
believe
fucking
this.
power.
Valleys, and
The mammoth? A woolly mammoth, Admiral. We both saw it through binoculars, plain as day. That thing's supposed to have been extinct for thousands of years. How are we going to explain any of this? The boys back at base...
Boys back at base aren't gonna find out if we don't make radio contact. First, let's focus on making it back in one piece. Now keep trying the radio. My compass is out of whack.
Yes, sir. I just can't get it... Wait. Admiral, look ahead.
My God, Carter. Is that a city?
A city? Way up here in the Arctic. But we're hundreds of miles. Admiral, port side.
What in God's name?
Starboard side too, sir. There's another one.
Boxing us in. Our controls aren't responding. What is this? I can't move them.
Sir, the radio.
Welcome, Admiral, to our domain. We shall land you in exactly 7 minutes. Who are you and what have you done to our plane? Relax, Admiral. You are in good hands.
As a prominent explorer, Rear Admiral Byrd was known to keep a number of diaries containing notes on his various Arctic and Antarctic expeditions. Since most of the official documents relating to Operation High Jump are still classified, curious minds have wondered if some of Byrd's own personal writings have also been hidden from the official Navy reports. The legend of Byrd's so-called secret diary has persisted for many years, with a number of authors coming forward claiming to have caught a glimpse of its contents. In author Tim Beckley's book, The Missing Diary of Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a bizarre incident is detailed in which Byrd, behind the controls of a Navy scout plane over the Arctic, is flying due north. Suddenly, he saw what appeared to be mountains and green valleys down below. This was shocking, and Admiral Byrd journaled his reactions, saying it was unlike anything he'd ever seen. He also noted that the sun was no longer visible, and that the light was somehow different in this new environment. Changing from his original course and altitude to begin inspecting the lush green hills below, he received another shock. A large animal, which he quickly determined to be a woolly mammoth, was on the ground, alive and well. Unable to establish radio contact with his base, the Admiral then realized he had lost control of his aircraft. There were now 2 unusual aircraft flying alongside him, radiant in appearance and marked with swastika symbols on their sides. Terrified by the unusual craft and the strange force that seemed to be holding his aircraft steady, that's when a voice crackled over his radio, speaking English in what he described as a Nordic or slight German accent. The voice assured him that he was safe. His plane was then escorted to a nearby city and vertically landed. His last flight log entry in his diary was apparently made hastily as he watched several tall, blonde-haired men approaching his plane to greet him. Byrd and his radio man were then escorted from the plane, being treated very cordially as guests. Byrd was very struck by the beauty and technological advancements of this strange crystal city and its people. Admiral Byrd was then introduced to a key figure in their society called Master. The man explained to Admiral Byrd where he had been taken to and why. The city he was in was part of the domain of the Ariani, the inner world of the Earth. Evidently, the Ariani people are well aware of the surface world, as the Master called it, and also that Admiral Byrd was a well-known figure on the surface. The Master quickly got to the point of their meeting and warned Byrd about the dangers of humans and their experimentation with atomic energy. He explained that the Ariani's interest in the surface began with the atomic bombs dropped over Japan, which prompted them to send flying machines to the surface to investigate what the humans were doing with atomic energy. He referred to these flying machines as Flugelrods. These are apparently the UFOs and strange craft reported by people all over the world. The Master explained that all the world leaders had already been contacted, and that Admiral Byrd, as a key government official, would be their chosen witness to verify that the inner world and its highly advanced race of people existed. It seems that the Master wanted to impart a message of peace to the human race, saying that we cannot expect to survive if war and the use of nuclear weapons were to continue. According to Tim Beckley's book, which recounts the Admiral's diary, as the Admiral was later escorted back to the Arctic surface, the departing pilot of the strange saucer-shaped escort craft said farewell, not in English, but in German.
We are leaving you now, Admiral. Your controls are free. Auf Wiedersehen.
In all honesty, without ever knowing the validity of the author's sources, The Missing Diary of Admiral Richard E. Byrd reads very much like an episode of the Dimension X radio series from the 1950s. In fact, the very first episode for the Dimension X series was titled The Outer Limit and was aired on April 4th, 1950. In the story, an experimental rocket plane vanishes during a test flight, and when it returns, the pilot is raving about having encountered an alien civilization that has been watching mankind dangerously toying with atomic weapons.
What are they saying, Steve? What are they saying?
It's about nuclear fission. They know about it. They know the danger of it. Long ago, they had wars that almost destroyed them. And finally, they learned. Now they've outlawed war.
Go on, Steve.
They patrol space. When their detector picks up an atomic explosion, they send patrol.
These aliens see mankind as a threat to the wider universe. The aliens warn the pilot to tell all of humanity not to continue messing with atomic fission, or they will destroy the planet. It's interesting that this episode aired only 3 years after Operation High Jump concluded in 1947. The 1940s and 50s was a time in American culture when ideas about war, space travel, alien races, and nuclear destruction were a central topic in media and entertainment. So perhaps the idea of Hollow Earth being discovered by a key military figure like Admiral Byrd in 1947 is somehow connected to this science fiction craze. But the problem in reality is that Admiral Byrd cannot be in 2 places at once. It is an indisputable fact that Admiral Byrd was involved with Operation High Jump, which concluded toward the end of February 1947. But according to his diary entries, the supposed flight he took over the Arctic, which is at the North Pole, during which he encountered the Ariani people, is also recorded as taking place during that same month. In the beginning of his diary, which was again not the original diary but a book published in 1990 by an author who claimed to have read and transcribed his diary, Admiral Byrd and the accompanying photo captions clearly state that his flight north over the Arctic and his meeting with the Ariani took place in February 1947. Remember that Byrd's harrowing first ever flight to the North Pole that won him a Medal of Honor was conducted 20 years before Operation High Jump in 1926. Byrd apparently did make other flights over the Arctic in the 1920s. Those are the only other recorded flights he made in that region. Between 1947 and his death in 1957, with Byrd now being around 60 years old, records don't seem to support the idea that he was still flying missions over the Arctic after the conclusion of Operation High Jump. So why would his supposed diary say he was flying a scouting mission over the North Pole in February when he was supposed to be overseeing training and research, and evidently fighting Nazi UFOs, near the South Pole, in Antarctica? Are we to assume that while military records show him as acting OIC over a naval operation at the South Pole, Major Byrd snuck off ship in February to visit another base on the other side of the planet, just to do a scouting flight and then return back to the South Pole? Or is it possible that the story has become highly convoluted over time, with facts, times, and dates becoming misconstrued, as well as fantastic additions about Hollow Earth discoveries and the Ariani people being added? Aside from the overlapping time frames, there are many other contradictions. In the account of the 2006 Russian documentary based on the KGB report, the UFO/Flugelrad pilots are clearly hostile, attacking and destroying US ships off the coast of Antarctica. In the other account, the one in Byrd's diary, the pilots of the Flugelrad are peaceful Ariani people, opposed to war and violence, warning mankind of the dangers of atomic energy. Do the conspiracy theorists believe that the Nazis encountered the Ariani first, obtained advanced aircraft, and then used them against the Americans? Again, other speculation suggests that the Nazis were building their own experimental aircraft. Secret anti-gravity projects like the Glocke are frequently cited in these rumors. Whatever the case, the Americans taking Nazi war criminals from Germany after the end of World War II to work on their advanced rocket and space propulsion program during Operation Paperclip did nothing to quell such rumors. Speaking of bombs, in the diary record of Admiral Byrd's meeting with the master of the Ariani, the master mentioned the bombs dropped on Japan, but not the bombs supposedly dropped on Antarctica to destroy the hidden Nazi base, which may have actually killed a group of Ariani people rather than Nazis. You'd think the master would have said something about that when he met Admiral Byrd. It's also interesting that the Ariani name used in Byrd's supposed diary, along with the description of the highly advanced race of people and their German dialect, all of this just ties very closely with Hitler's pre-existing beliefs about the existence of an ancient Aryan race, with their blonde hair and blue eyes and advanced technology. It's all very confusing. The Byrd diary entries, the KGB report, the Russian documentary, and the conspiracies surrounding the hidden bases in Antarctica. Bizarre as they are, they all seem to be dubious at best. Fabricated records that could have been created, not out of whole cloth, but out of an amalgamation of both documented facts and wild conspiracies. But certainly, all of them couldn't be true, what with all the conflicting information. Since we are on the topic of diary discrepancies, it's worth mentioning that even Admiral Byrd's 1926 flight over the North Pole is highly debated. The evidence of his flight reaching the North Pole was recorded in his personal diary. The debate is over whether Byrd's plane covered the distance in the time claimed, as skeptics argue that the available evidence suggests the journey was shorter than required to reach the pole fully. Some critics have pointed out discrepancies between Byrd's handwritten diary and the official typewritten report submitted after the expedition, which suggests alterations to navigational data. However, supporters have defended Byrd's achievements, questioning the motives behind the criticism and emphasizing the contextual challenges of polar navigation during that era. Far from claiming to have made an extraordinary discovery of Hollow Earth during any of his time spent in the northern or southern poles, we now see that even Admiral Byrd's much more practical claim of being the first pilot to reach the North Pole by aircraft likewise continues to be a topic of investigation and heated discussion long after the events took place. Even without the addition of UFOs and a Hollow Earth discovery, unless all of the official records have been altered, the possibility of a secret Nazi base being the target of Operation High Jump is also low. The mission itself took place in the Ross Ice Shelf area of Antarctica, a location previously explored by Rear Admiral Byrd in the late 1920s. The hidden Nazi base is often cited by theorists as being in the area of Queen Maud Land, the same region the Germans landed in 1938. These are two entirely different areas. If the goal of High Jump was to destroy a Nazi base in Queen Maud Land, then why was the American task force nowhere near this theoretical location? Quite frankly, without the availability of highly advanced technology, a Nazi military base in Antarctica does seem very impractical. While their U-boats did operate in the waters of the southern Atlantic, there's no evidence to suggest that a dedicated base was ever built on the Antarctic coast. According to official Nazi documents, their one and only expedition to the Antarctic was in 1938 during their efforts to set up their own whaling industry. A U-boat pen in such a location would have been impractical to say the least. The German submarines were fragile, and with the coast often extended outward by hundreds of miles of ice 1 to 2 meters thick, the simple act of a submarine surfacing, docking, and departing would have been extremely difficult. In spite of these arguments, many theorists are quick to highlight that the High Jump expedition did sustain a number of casualties during its time in the Antarctic, including the loss of a few aircraft. For them, these losses are proof that contact was made with a hostile force. But by all official records, the only thing these men seem to have encountered was a very harsh climate. On December 30th, 1946, a PBM Mariner aircraft found itself caught in a nasty blizzard, the whiteout conditions disorienting the crew and resulting in a crash that claimed the lives of 3 men. Then, in January 1947, another casualty occurred when Seaman Vance N. Woodall died during a ship unloading accident on the Ross Ice Shelf. He was tragically crushed between a piece of heavy roller equipment being used to pave the ice in order to build an airstrip. With 4 deaths and likely dozens of other cold weather casualties, the reports say that the Navy pulled the plug on High Jump early in order to avoid any further mishaps. So what about the 3 nuclear bombs supposedly dropped on the hidden Nazi base? Interestingly enough, 3 atomic weapons were detonated near the Antarctic, but not in 1947. In 1958, clearly disregarding the warnings of the Ariani people, the US wanted to see the potential effects that nuclear explosions had on the atmosphere. To accomplish this, 3 nukes were detonated at high altitude over the South Atlantic, about 2,000 kilometers off the coast of Antarctica. Part of Operation Argus, the primary aim of these tests was to see if nuclear detonations at high altitudes could create radiation belts similar to the Van Allen radiation belts. These artificial belts were expected to degrade or destroy the explosive mechanisms of incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles. The theory was this could help in defending against potential Soviet missile attacks. This certainly resonates with Admiral Byrd's 1947 warning about the possibility of aircraft, or very fast flying objects, heading towards the United States over the poles. Are we starting to see that although all these events actually happened, is it possible that the desire to legitimize an incredible story about either the Nazis or Admiral Byrd finding an entrance to Hollow Earth is what led to all of these unrelated military activities near Antarctica being compiled together to construct a specific narrative? Speaking of the Soviets, there is one more thing to point out, although it is certainly not the last contradiction. There's the declassified KGB report, which the 2006 Russian documentary was based on. It's hard to verify if that even exists. If it does, it's rife with a number of glaring errors. For example, the destroyer named as being sunk, the USS Maddox, wasn't with the High Jump expedition. At that point in time, it was in port back in the States. Nearly 20 years later, that same ship was involved in a strange incident in the Gulf of Tonkin, which is often credited with escalating American involvement in the Vietnam War. So unless it was sunk in 1947 near Antarctica by UFOs, was then resurrected and made its way to Southeast Asia in 1964, the 2006 Russian documentary should have checked their facts first. Unless they were referring to the other Maddox destroyer, which preceded the second one. But then, the first USS Maddox was not in service at the time of Operation High Jump. It had already been sunk by German aircraft in 1943, although not by UFOs, and not off the coast of Antarctica, but off the coast of Italy. Likewise, the supposed KGB report also cites another vessel that never took part in the operation, the aircraft carrier USS Casablanca. The only carrier to serve in the expedition was the flagship USS Philippine Sea, a ship which is never even mentioned in the Russian documentary. While all indications point to Operation High Jump being nothing more than an Antarctic training exercise, where does that leave us with claims of hollow Earth exploration? Did the Germans, with their occult fascinations, manage to locate an entire hidden world beneath Antarctica? And did the Ariani then befriend them and give them UFOs to fight the Americans? Or do the Ariani people truly exist, and due to a case of mistaken identity, they were thought to be Nazis when encountered in the Antarctic by Operation High Jump? Apparently, an easy enough mistake to make, what with their German accents and swastikas emblazoned on the sides of their Flugelrad flying machines. In his alleged diary, Admiral Byrd did recount that the master of the Ariani said that they had tried to make contact with humans in 1945, but their Flugelrad aircraft had been attacked by military jets. Maybe that's what the Russian documentary was talking about, but it confused the dates, location, and everything else about the event. Did Richard Byrd possibly discover the Ariani subterranean world during Operation High Jump near the South Pole, instead of during a February flight over the Arctic at the North Pole? That would at least explain the overlapping timelines, and who knows, maybe Admiral Byrd used the term Arctic and Antarctic interchangeably. A simple mistake. But there seems to be no evidence that Admiral Byrd flew at all during Operation High Jump, rather relegating himself to his duties as overseer, being the mission's OIC. 3 other men are mentioned in the records as being key pilots during the operation. There is at least one interesting discovery made by one of these 3 pilots, Lieutenant Commander Dave Bunger, during one of his flights over Antarctica. And maybe this is where the idea of Hollow Earth being discovered was further exaggerated. On February 1st, 1947, as Lieutenant Commander Bunger took off in his PBM float plane, he reached the Antarctic coastline and started flying west to begin photomapping. Suddenly, in the barren white below, there appeared a blue and green lake situated among brown, barren hills, a very unusual sight against the white landscape. He then landed the plane on the lake. Without any technical tools to examine the water, there wasn't much he could do other than to collect a sample of water in a bottle. It turned out to be brackish, indicating that the lake was actually an open arm of the sea. So who knows, maybe the Nazis really could get their U-boats far enough inland to build a secret base. But that is the only discovery mentioned during Operation High Jump that says anything close to Admiral Byrd's supposed testimony about seeing mountains, lush greenery, and a woolly mammoth. With no hard evidence of Byrd's diary entries about Hollow Earth actually existing, the Byrd Polar and Climate Research Center commented that they, quote, receive questions about the Hollow Earth every year, and that there are no records to support these claims in their archive. Despite the lack of hard evidence, the Hollow Earth theory continues to provoke thought and debate. Of course, if it did exist, and our governments were aware of it, what are the odds they would tell us about it? In the scientific community, Hollow Earth is largely dismissed as pseudoscience, similar to continuing theories about the Earth being flat. Those who have studied it will assure us that the inner Earth is not hollow, but is composed of a crust, mantle, and outer and inner cores. Long story short, aside from the intense heat, pressure, and darkness, science would tell us there is very little room down there for entire ecosystems to exist, let alone thriving civilizations and crystal cities. Further disputing the theory are the images produced by modern satellite imagery and testimonies of contemporary Arctic explorers, which have likewise fallen short of validating the existence of openings to Hollow Earth at either pole. But to be fair, imagery and personal testimonies can always be changed if someone really wanted to hide something. While the more bizarre theories about Operation High Jump are full of holes, it's interesting to note that Hollow Earth, or something similar, makes an appearance in the oral histories of many indigenous cultures. According to the Native American Muskogee peoples, their ancestors emerged long ago via deep caverns dug into the earth, located near the present-day Red River in the southeastern United States. There are many other theories and testimonies about strange creatures and giants living in vast interconnecting cave systems deep beneath the surface, their cave entrances often hidden, sometimes deep in jungles and other hard-to-reach places. Many believe that UFOs and all these other unexplained phenomena are not coming from millions of light years away in outer space or from other dimensional realms, but from this same planet, emerging out of openings that lead down into a subterranean ecosystem. With countless other mythologies dating back thousands of years, such as the Greeks and Hindus describing journeys to dark underworlds filled with terrifying spirits and creatures, you really do have to wonder why humans have always been so possessed with the idea of there being a hollow Earth. It's only our trust in scientific data that tells us what lies below the surface. So until we see it with our own eyes, we never can know for certain what's really going on right beneath our feet.
Oh, God. Well, hopefully people will be buying my stuff. Ooh, that might be kind of good.
Iraq's 1991 defeat by a US-led coalition set in motion a series of events which would ultimately lead to another US invasion in 2003. But this new invasion was not just a continuation of 1991. New leaders, revived disputes, and the shock of the 9/11 terrorist attacks all result in one of recent history's most controversial wars. So why did the US invade Iraq again? After the end of the Gulf War in February 1991, the United Nations Security Council adopts Resolution 687. It requires that Iraq pay reparations, destroy all chemical and biological weapons and missiles, and not pursue nuclear weapons. Together, these weapons are called Weapons of Mass Destruction, or WMDs. The UN imposes economic and military sanctions until Iraq complies with the resolution. During the Gulf War, Saddam gave orders to prepare chemical and biological weapons, including 1,200 chemical aircraft bombs, 13,000 gas artillery shells, 8,320 Grad rockets loaded with nerve agents, and 25 biological weapon rockets. Coalition troops trained to fight on a chemical battlefield.
We've never been put into a position where we've actually had to go into combat in a chemical environment. So this is all got new equipment, newer style gas masks, train, we practice, we go through the gas chambers, but we never really applied ourselves as a combat unit.
Facing bullets is one thing, but facing chemical gas, the threat of it is another.
It's a bit different, but it's fucking horrible, though.
You know, I mean, it seems like they're cheap.
But Saddam does not use these weapons, although he previously did in the Iran-Iraq War and against rebel groups within Iraq, including civilians. After 1991, UN inspectors also uncover a former Iraqi uranium enrichment program. Some in Washington, including President George H.W. Bush, want to depose Saddam, but many countries oppose this. So Bush seeks to withdraw troops and create a post-Cold War system based on international cooperation.
But I would repeat here, I do not want send out the impression that U.S. troops will be permanently stationed in the Gulf. I want them back. So we're still working, we're just beginning to work out these security arrangements, but a part of it will not be a continued presence of substantial quantities of U.S. troops. I'd like to see them all out of there as soon as possible, but there's some shorter-run security problems that I don't want to underestimate.
But the US and some allies are still militarily involved. They airdrop aid and create 2 no-fly zones to protect suppressed Kurdish groups in the north and Shia tribes in the south. Saddam's repression isolates Iraq, and sanctions bar selling oil or importing industrial and medical equipment which could have military uses. Agriculture and health suffer, causing up to 500,000 Iraqis to die of disease and malnutrition. Some experts, though, argue these figures are exaggerated or exacerbated by Iraqi actions in order to gain sympathy. Iraq claims to destroy all WMDs, but inspectors cannot confirm this, and they complain of poor cooperation and potential deception. So UN sanctions continue during President Bill Clinton's policy of containment, although an oil for food program allows Iraq to sell some oil. In 1998, UN inspectors request to search off-limits areas like presidential palaces. Saddam refuses and accuses the inspectors of cooperating with US and Israeli intelligence. In some cases, this is true. Saddam expels the inspectors, triggering a US and British military response known as Operation Desert Fox. In December 1998, US and UK forces hit suspected Iraqi weapons facilities with 600 bombs and 415 cruise missiles. Clinton also signs the Iraq Liberation Act, providing support for exiled opposition groups.
So long as Saddam remains in power, he will remain a threat to his people, his region, and the world. With our allies, we must pursue a strategy to contain him and to constrain his weapons of mass destruction program, while working toward the day Iraq has a government willing to live at peace with its people and with its neighbors.
Russia, France, China, and some Arab nations condemn the attack. Russia, China, and France want to reduce sanctions, probably because they want lucrative oil concessions. Some Iraqi neighbors, like Jordan and Turkey, also smuggle Iraqi oil. By 2000, Iraq is arguably recovering, with oil sales doubling GDP per capita between 1997 and 2000. The CIA concludes Saddam is secure against internal threats and that he's rehabilitating his international standing. In January 2001, George W. Bush, son of former President George H.W. Bush, becomes president. His campaign focused on domestic issues, but this all changes on September 11, 2001. The 9/11 terrorist attacks forced the Bush administration into action. U.S. intelligence identifies terrorist organization Al-Qaeda, led by exiled Saudi Osama bin Laden, as responsible. In the 1990s, Al-Qaeda had launched attacks against U.S. interests to protest U.S. support for Israel and military presence in Saudi Arabia. In October 2001, U.S. forces invade Afghanistan, where bin Laden lives. The U.S. administration also links Al-Qaeda to Iraq. The 9/11 attack was much more sophisticated than earlier bombings, causing some to suspect state sponsorship. Although Bush never explicitly says Iraq is directly responsible for 9/11, U.S. officials point to Iraq's WMD history, claiming Iraq could provide terrorists with devastating weapons. It's a powerful argument in the post-9/11 environment of American insecurity and anthrax attacks. In January 2002, Bush calls out a so-called axis of evil.
North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. This is a regime that has already used poison gas to murder thousands of its own citizens, leaving the bodies of mothers huddled over their dead children.
Bush's approval rating reaches 90%, the highest ever recorded. But U.S. intelligence struggles to link Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden. The CIA claims Iraqi government links to Iraq-based al-Qaeda operative Abu Musab al-Zarqawi and 9/11 plotter Mohammed Atta, but evidence is weak. Instead, experts conclude al-Qaeda and Iraq are generally opposed. Bin Laden, for example, declared Iraq as heretical for its secularism. Others claim Saddam is a rational actor who doesn't want to attack America. Professor Adam Cobb is among the critics. The president and others have repeatedly said that Saddam could hand over WMD to al-Qaeda. It is certainly technically possible, but they have never provided more than vague innuendo to suggest what incentives Saddam might gain from doing so. This is because the proposition does not bear scrutiny. Some government figures later retract statements linking Iraq to 9/11, but in October 2002, 66% of Americans believe Iraq assisted the attack. The same month, U.S. Congress authorizes force against Iraq, with 97% of Republican and 57% of Democrat senators voting in favor. There are many reasons the U.S. invades Iraq in 2003, but the key elements include an acute sense of danger, neoconservative opportunism, Bush's presidency, and Iraqi miscalculations. Iraqi possession or pursuit of WMDs forms the central U.S. argument. The U.S. claims Iraq breached the 1991 ceasefire after expelling inspectors in 1998 and may hand WMDs to terrorists. Many countries in Europe and the Middle East are also concerned about Iraqi WMDs. So British Prime Minister Tony Blair and U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell encouraged Bush to take a diplomatic approach via the UN. In November 2002, the UN Security Council unanimously passes Resolution 1441 under U.S. pressure, demanding the return of weapon inspectors. Importantly, the resolution does not allow for the use of force and gives Saddam a final opportunity to comply. Saddam accepts, and UN and International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors, led by Hans Blix and Mohammed El-Baradei, return. They often visit sites based on U.S. intelligence, but find no WMDs. Could there be 100% certainty about the existence of weapons of mass destruction, but 0% knowledge about their location? The CIA did not see 9/11 coming, so it's under pressure to find Iraqi WMDs and prevent another potentially more devastating attack. Intelligence figures do not fabricate evidence, but they are affected by political priorities, media pressure, and public fears, meaning they give more weight to evidence linking Iraq and WMDs than evidence to the contrary. Much of the intel they focus on is faulty, especially from Iraqi exiles who want to remove Saddam or seek personal gain. One important Germany-based asset, Rafid Ahmed Alman, also known as Curveball, provides detailed information on supposed mobile biological weapons labs. German intelligence doubts the story, but the CIA accepts it. As Blix explains, it's hard to disprove something exists. The mobile bioweapon production units have become a big ticket. Some have told me that the information is not all that solid. Without evidence, how do we know? I was asked in the council whether it was plausible, and I said yes. After all, we are told that the Russians did it in railcars. But it is strange that no satellite pictures or other pictures were taken, only human stories. The US also ignores expert skepticism and accepts British claims that Iraq bought uranium from Niger. The documents related to the case are later shown to be frauds. Although some US intelligence officials insist that much of the intel can't yet be confirmed, government officials publicly release it anyway. The US intelligence community is also fragmented. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Douglas Feith establishes a rival intelligence subgroup within the Pentagon which aggressively promotes evidence of Iraqi WMDs. The CIA develops a national intelligence estimate reinforcing many WMD claims. It says there is no link between Saddam and al-Qaeda, but also suggests Saddam could forge one if he wanted to. On February 5, 2003, Powell presents U.S. findings to the UN Security Council. His presentation includes much of the under-verified information, like the mobile labs, and shows photograph captions more certain than the evidence allows. The U.S. administration and media celebrate the presentation as a smoking gun, especially intercepted conversations like this one.
أينما وردت هي تعليمات لاسلكية لاسلكية زيني.
However, the international observers and experts like Blix are not convinced. Our analysts felt they were not impressed by Powell's presentation and even less by the intelligence we have been acting on. No one will give Iraq the benefit of the doubt, but it is hard for any outsider to feel that the intelligence provided has weighed heavily. Although insecurity undoubtedly influenced US policy, some academics argue neoconservative opportunism drives American action. This argument focuses on officials like Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, his deputy Paul Wolfowitz, and advisor Richard Perle. They're supported by think tanks and academics who develop an ideology of unilateral American military intervention to directly support US economic and strategic interests. Some neoconservatives oppose the 1990s containment strategy, support exiled Iraqi opposition, and advocate Saddam's removal. They claim multilateral cooperation with allies hindered US actions in Kosovo and elsewhere, undermining American credibility. Influential think tank Project for the New American Century even suggests before 9/11 that an event like a, quote, new Pearl Harbor could galvanize American military rearmament and dominance. Some therefore argue that 9/11 is an opportunity to set up a pro-US Iraqi client state and promote Israeli interests, which many neocons firmly support. Some State Department diplomats oppose the neoconservatives and persuade Bush to seek another UN resolution. But initial success in Afghanistan and widespread public and political support reinforces the pro-war neoconservative position, which claims Iraqi ceasefire breaches authorize US military action. Some also argue that oil plays a role. Iraq has around 60% of known oil reserves at the time and is much cheaper than US-produced oil. US reliance on Middle Eastern oil has also increased from 8% in 1985 to 21% in 2001. Some critics claim neoconservatives want to use American military power to maintain unsustainable oil consumption at home. Other critics say the US priority is preventing French, Russian, or Chinese access to Iraqi oil reserves. Academics also argue neoconservatives promote a militarized, unilateral form of liberal democracy. Bush adds democratizing Iraq as a justification for the war, but this is not very persuasive for the American public. Even so, neoconservatives hope democracy can revolutionize the region, aid Israel, allow the US to withdraw troops from Saudi Arabia, and improve...
Oh my god. You know what? We might just restart this stream here later on. I was just watching a video the whole fucking time, man. It was horrible. I should have double-checked my stash before. Alright, well, we got some extra cases, organized things a little bit. Now we're going to sell things a little. I wonder how much GPUs are going for. Maybe we got to be a certain level to... Oh my god, level 40. That line is for a quest, that's for a quest. I think I need the kitty cat for a quest. What was here? I don't know. We probably slide the weapons box up there. Oh, maybe I forgot to pin it, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, we'll probably just restart the stream here in a little bit. Oh god, we gotta get this stuff updated too.